Welcome to the My Warped Life podcast. I'm sitting here with my good friend Tony Arati. I haven't seen you much.
I
haven't seen you in a while. How you been?
Busy. I've been out of town. I went to Phoenix, Arizona, and caught a hopping king.
So, Tony, it's kind of ironic that when I started working with Monster Energy Drink, the biggest thing they did was provide us water. And that water was in those cans that we talked about in our fun TikTok we did. And now, guess what? We're working for water again. Thank you, Liquid Death. Before we get started, there's going to be a couple things. This episode is going to have a lot of guests, number one.
On.
This is going to be we're going to call this episode Take Two, Warped Roadies, Take Two.
Right, roadies.
Yeah, because we had multiple takes on this to get this right. Earlier, we did lose all the audio early on, and as we go through this, you'll understand what Take Two means when it comes to a reality television show. But first, Tony, I want to thank you for my birthday present. Tony got me
you got to bring it right up to the camera.
The My Warped Life golf balls, and you'll be finding these all over the San Gabriel Valley. We would pass these out, but I'm sure I'll be passing them out to random people. I'll be picking them up.
They'll be in bushes in every course.
They'll be white. What logo are you playing? And they'll be like, My Warped Life ball. I'm playing the My Warped Life Callaway. So on another note, I have to tell you a story before we get going, because I always say, like, there's things that affect your life, and then sometimes it comes full circle. Last week, a good friend of ours, K2, who owns Side Pie, who's been selling pizzas out of the side of his fence all through the pandemic.
Right.
I heard he made like 6 figures. So
what?
Yeah, he made a fortune selling pizzas, and hope the IRS isn't listening, but he did pretty well out there. And he invited us to this little surprise party that was for his significant other, Rosanna, very lovely woman. And you sit there, and a lot of times when you're around K2, similar when I come to your house, you just don't know who's there.
Sure.
And this one guy kind of walked up to me, and we were talking, and K2, of course, goes, "Oh, he was in a band." And I go, "Oh, what band were you?" And he goes, I played for Morrissey.
Oh.
And I was like, I got to ask you a question. He said, "Sure." And I go, "Did you play at the Aloha Towers Hawaii show with Morrissey?" And he goes, "I did." And I said, "I was the production manager on that show, and I have to tell you something. I learned from that show about treating people well, putting yourself aside at times. Because Aloha Towers was a place we did shows, and if you're ever going to Honolulu, you pass Aloha Towers on the right. It's there. It's the old customs building for Hawaii.
Right.
So every time ships would come in, they would check what's coming into the island. Golden Voice, when I was with Golden Voice, me and Rick Van Satten went over there, and we started doing shows at Aloha Towers, the first show being the final Jane's Addiction show.
Right.
But we had this, and we'd always have a great time with the bands. And we would, I'd take them to different parts of the island. If they wanted to go surfing, we had friends with surfboards. If they wanted lessons, it was a great time. Like playing in Hawaii, the only person that was miserable in Hawaii was Glenn Danzig one time. He was just miserable the whole time. I go, "You're never going to be happy anywhere." If you know Glenn Danzig, it makes a lot of sense. So the band was there, and my friend was the production manager. And I'd worked with him on Lollapalooza, and he was explaining to me how they had just finished this kind of long tour, I think, of Southeast Asia and Australia. A lot of times people would play Hawaii, and they were super excited because everyone, the band and crew, were all going to go to Kapalua on Maui that a week. They were going to have a week in condos there, and how excited they were. And we were having a great time. The people were great. Band was cool. Everyone was having fun. And I was sitting with him when he got a phone call from the road manager who said, Morrissey got sunburned, like on those little paddle boats that you go. Like, I think he got a little too much sun.
Right.
And he's decided that he hates Hawaii or is bored with Hawaii. And the trip was canceled for the crew. Everyone had to fly back to Los Angeles in case he needed them. And I was sitting in this room when this guy had to deal with that because, I mean,
it's your livelihood, right?
You're going to bum out everyone around you. When you tell people that we're planning, and maybe some of them actually, I think, had girlfriends flying in.
Right. It
was going to be it was canceled. There was 2 parts to this. Number one, I said, he said they were prepaid, like these things. You couldn't cancel.
Right.
So of course I said, "Can I have one of them? Like, I have nowhere to go.
Right.
I can hang out here in Hawaii for a week." So he gave me. So I got a free trip on Morrissey.
Oh, right on.
But number two, I was like, I can't believe this guy can't realize how bummed out these people were going to be. Not a lot of them had never been to Hawaii. They were looking forward to it. And I asked this guy, so we're talking about this. I go, I was the production man. He goes, "You looked familiar, but I used to look a lot different." So, and I said, well, the only thing I could do at that night at the show was, if you know Morrissey, you're not allowed to have any meat around when he's playing.
Right,
They don't want hot dogs in the venue. They don't want any meat or anything. So I was so pissed. And I had nothing to lose. I had nothing to relate to this, just knowing how bummed these people were.
Right.
So there was always this guy that sold hot dogs, had a hot dog truck, out in front of the venue when people would leave. So while they were playing, I'm I don't know why sometimes I get wound up, this week, I've been wound up. So I go, okay, I'm going to get back at Morrissey. So
Morrissey's having a bad week, by the way.
So
Not to pile on Morrissey, but there's a lot going on.
So they have
news.
a limo that they have to. Morrissey wanted a limo to run them, basically do a runner, get off stage, get in the limo, and go. So the only thing I could do was bring the hot dog truck up and park it right in front of the limo. So when he got off stage, he ran to the limo, and there's the hot dog truck. So he couldn't leave right away, and there's a smell of hot dogs coming at him. It was my only way to get back at him for doing this to his band and crew. So that little memory in the park last week kind of sparked it about me. Sometimes we have to separate our own needs for the betterment of everyone. And I think it would have been smart for Morrissey to say, "Hey, I got sunburned, but cool. You guys all go to Hawaii. I'm going to go back to LA, or let's go and I can sit inside," because he could I'm sure he had a beautiful room there because it looks over a beautiful part of Maui. So I just had to tell you that story before we get started.
Well, I think the moral of the story is don't fuck with people, or you're going to get the smell of hot dog in your face.
Get some hot dogs in your face. I just remember that was that moment. I was
there's a whole issue of the Simpsons and what's going on and what happened in Rolling Stone. His manager came back with the article. He said, "I've got 2 Latinos in my band. How dare you?" I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ.
This episode, though, is going to have a lot of people. I mean, it's going to, so number one, Vivian wants us to remind you that if you like this episode, give us a rating. We need to get more ratings, so we kind of move up there so more people can hear this, because we're getting, it keeps growing each week.
It is growing. We're getting a lot of people.
It's growing each week, and this episode that's going to have a lot of people. I interviewed a lot of people for this episode because it's all about the Warped Roadies, which was a television show that lasted 2 seasons on Fuse. And so we're going to be doing a lot of things about, with Terry and Danny and Amy and Damon and Sully and Kenny, and Sierra jumps in there. And I asked all these people how they got involved in Warped Tour. And I think one of the unique things and funny, ironic stories is how Danny got involved in the tour.
I was 19-year-old little good Mormon boy out of high school, and I had an 18-year-old girlfriend who told me that if I didn't go on a Mormon mission, then we weren't getting married. And I mean, this girl was the love of my life, or so I thought. So, I decided it was missionary time, and then. So I went on a Mormon mission to Tampa, Florida. Well, Fort Myers, Florida, which is actually right across the bay from the Warped Tour venue we did in Vintnot Park. And then I ended up about 4 months in, I got the old, Dear John letter. "Hey, I found a guy that's superior to you, and I'm not going to wait for you." And then I said, what the hell am I doing here? All my friends were so mad at me. They're like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" But, it was fun, actually. It taught me a lot, because it's funny, because when I first went on the mission, I left being a kid that wore collared shirts and, preppy stuff. And then when I got home and I had nothing. I didn't know what I was doing, and I wanted to go to school to be a therapist of some sort, maybe work for an NBA team. And my brother called me, and we, just so happened we grew up with the Used in Provo, Utah, with Quinn Allman and Brandon Steinecker. And my brother was tattooing them on Taste of Chaos with You. And he said, "Come on out." And I went right from my Mormon mission to a tour bus with Burt McCracken, taking shots till about 4 a.m. And I got offered a job by Andy Lee and Brianne Grimley. And I had no idea what I was walking into when I accepted the job. I'd never even been to Warped Tour. So
this is off of a Mormon mission.
Yeah, and you're going to learn a little bit.
Amazing musical, by the way.
You're going to learn a little bit about Danny. And it's kind of like one of those things that in your mind, you can't help but react in a certain way, because when you put together Danny, Florida, and Mormon Mission, my God, it's like its own show in itself. It's like a Hurricane Danny rolling through, and I think our good friend Terry had a really cool response to, like, the same way we all do. We laughed.
Dude, I totally forgot that Danny went on a mission until right now. I was at his farewell, and we were all there, just like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, you're you're going on a mission?" Like, I'm pretty sure in a couple of years we're going to end up on a bus just traveling the United States together.
Too funny. I guess you visualize Danny, especially when he said in Florida on a mission.
Yeah, Danny going door to door, like, "Hey, can I? Have you heard about their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
Do you have any daughters in there that need saving?
Yeah."
I'm wondering if he had the quintessential uniform and the short sleeve white shirts with the razor thin black tie.
And he's like riding his bike through Florida. Just the thought of that, and anyone who met Danny, just thinking about that will make you laugh. But, Terry is another person like that, but hearing his journey into Warped Tour is even kind of funnier.
Was always a Warped Tour kid. I went to my first Warped Tour. My parents wouldn't let me go until I was 16, so I had to be able to drive myself, which was always fun. So whenever I saw parents at Warped Tour, I would always thank them. I'm like, "Thank you for bringing your kids to Warped Tour." My parents won it, and then I ran away with it. So I first went to my Warped Tour when I was 16. I was taking bass lessons at this place in Salt Lake City, and I was wearing a Flog and Molly shirt. The guy asked me if I was going to Warped Tour, and I was like, "Yep." And he was like, "If you get there early and you can find Kevin Lyman, tell him you'll help set up and you can get backstage passes." So I was like, "Okay." I was all by myself. I went early. I've never met you before. I have no idea what you look like or anything. And I just walked around the outside, just asking everybody, like, "Hey, are you Kevin Lyman? Are you Kevin Lyman?" And then until I ran into Big Mitch, who, famous Warped Tour stage manager. Mitch goes, "Why are you looking for Kevin?" It's like, "I heard if I help set up, I could get backstage passes." He goes, "Well, I need someone to help me throw my barricade." So I went and I helped throw barricade with Mitch. And then he gave me backstage passes. And that's back when they were that sticker. Remember when they were the sticker that you would put on your shirt? And it was really cool. And then so I did that every year. I used to help with catering all the time with Shelly and Trevor on the grill. And it was always the greatest thing. And I was just like, I'm just going to keep hustling until I get hired. And then out of nowhere, one of my best friends, Danny Bateman, who never went to the Warped Tour with me, by the way, was hired, called me one day and he goes, "Hey, guess what? I got a job on the Warped Tour."
That sucks,
what
man.
What the hell? How did this happen?
I've been busting my ass.
Still didn't get a job until 4 years later when Danny became the crew chief and people started to drop off. Danny gave me my shot.
Yeah. Pretty cool. It's funny how people always how do you end up on a tour? A lot of tours, it'll be someone that
the problem was he never found Kevin that first time around.
Well, no.
That was the problem.
No, he found Big Mitch.
Yeah.
Big Mitch is one of my favorite people in the world, but I could just picture Mitch every day finding two sucker kids to come move his barricade around, The barricade is the hardest job out there.
That's the hard knocks, kid. Sorry, you should have found Kevin.
Yeah, you should have found Kevin, but you should have my barricade kid.
You should have found Kevin.
I think he must have made his own stickers because I don't think we had any stickers. And stuck them on kid. Yeah. About an hour later, the kid's getting thrown out of the venue going, "Oh, but I worked for Big Mitch.
I swear to God, here's my sticker. Look, I got a sticker."
But then we kind of got to this point where it was also we were trying to figure out how to integrate people into the show, bring them in. And as social media gained, it was so important for us. And we kind of created this program for young people to be able to basically audition to be on Warped Tour as our pit reporter. And Amy Willard, her story's pretty cool, how she ended up getting on Warped Tour.
I think unlike most of the people who end up on Warped Tour, I actually auditioned for a little role that you guys have called the Monster Energy Pit Reporter. And I channeled Natalie Portman's SNL rap video and made my own version for Warped Tour. And that's how I applied.
It's one of those things where, I mean, we would get like hundreds of videos of young people that wanted to try out for this thing.
Right.
And Amy's was very unique. It was creative, and she was able to come out on the tour. And then you started rounding up other people, started drifting into the business, and it's funny because we get nicknames, and some of them are totally like blatant, like mustard shorts, like that's a name, like, you know. But then it could be subtle. It could be subtle. And this next person, his real name is Damon, and I named him Damone. So he became Damone.
Damone.
And you know,
I think a lot of people get nicknames in the Warped Tour just because you couldn't remember the name and you looked at their face and just the first thing that came to your mind.
Yeah. So Damone
Damone
is this is how Damone got involved in the tour.
Initially, so I played in bands for years, and then but I was sort of always the behind the scenes kind of guy, and I needed a little bit of a break from playing and dealing with that. So I started teching for a band called Census Fail, who has done Warped Tour many times, and so that was my first time going to Warped Tour was 2005 when I was teching for Census Fail, and then I started tour managing them in 2006. I think it was that tour where I became friends with a lot of your production office staff, and just kind of, you know, got in there. And then I lived in Chicago with some of the other peeps who worked for you, and that was sort of the in. And there was a spot opening, and I was lucky enough to get it.
He was teching. What was he doing?
Well, he was a drummer in a band, a kind of cool band called Braid. That was kind of so heart of the Midwest emo scene. He was teching for bands.
Okay.
But he looks like a Damone. Like, think of it was like, instead of Matt Damon, Matt Damone.
He looked more like a Matt Damon. He's like a clean cut look there. Now, I don't know what he looked like on the Warped Tour.
Think of Matt Damone would have probably gone a lot farther than Matt Damon, I think, you know? It was very sophisticated to have the name Damone.
So how long was he on the
he was out with us quite a while, and he worked in my office. He was worked on many projects with me. And still has gone on now to do a lot of really cool stuff. And, you know, but, you know, so it comes from all different places. And the next person that'll be part of this episode is someone that's very dear to my heart, and has been super, super cool. And we didn't quite see eye to eye many times when we started out, but Steve Sullivan is one of my favorite people. So let's hear from Steve.
You know, I was on tour with Kerry Nicholson. Well, I had done a bunch of local Warped Tours in Phoenix, Arizona at great places like the Celebrity Theater.
Oh, yeah, that was a memorable show.
Yeah. And so I think it was 97. I was on tour with the Beastie Boys in Australia, and Kerry was our production manager there. And he said I should come out, and he never really told me what the job was. He kept on saying I'd lose weight, which was pretty funny because I did. I lost like 40 pounds that first summer I worked on the Warped Tour. So I went out there, and I had the summer away from the Beastie Boys. It's pretty common with them. It was before festivals were all about summers. And I joined the Warped Tour, and I unloaded trucks, and I was part of the setup crew, which was not nearly as good looking as they became. And then I did security all day, helped a guy named Ken Parks out with really crazy, you know, boss tones, kids on stage and that kind of stuff.
You said something silly there, but probably true. Not as good looking as they became. You worked the shit out of your crew, man.
Oh, they did, but
they
got
buff.
But that setup crew were always like that's where I learned that I had to wear a shirt. Okay. I was that person back in 91 that could run no shirt all day long, 32-inch waist, cut, just looking good. Then all of a sudden, like, I'm out on Warped Tour. I'm still kind of doing it. Then one day, like, the setup crew started coming around, and I'm going, time to put on a shirt. There's a moment in time when you wear a shirt on tour. Like, you know.
This is a professional organization. Put a shirt on.
You know, and there's people that were on that tour that, no, not a professional organization. I got my belly, and it's hanging over my belt. So nothing to do with professional organizations here, Tony.
Come on, Kevin.
You know, so it's like, you know, and there was phases of this. And one of the most famous people who didn't wear a shirt very often is coming up next, my friend Kenny.
I just happened to be working the venue that was, you know, y'all were at. And I was working with Mark. Next thing I know, I'm throwing boxes up by myself, you know, because I was pretty big and burly back then, and I guess
didn't know better. You didn't know better at that point.
Yeah, I didn't know any better. Exactly. And then I guess after that was all said and done, he ran to you guys and goes, "Hey, this guy's loading the truck by himself." So we had that little talk in San Diego, and I guess one of the guys couldn't take it anymore, and that's when you approached me, and next thing I know, I was packing my bags and on my way.
So he was with you right up until the end, right? I
mean, yeah, Kenny was with me a long time, but I think it was probably his first job was probably slinging barricade for Mitch too.
Oh, really?
Because he saw say, "Hey man, you come here, sling some barricade for me."
I think I saw him backstage on the last one up wherever Google is up in north
San Francisco.
Yeah, he was there.
Yeah, of course I had to bring Kenny in for that show. I mean,
he's very distinct. You can't miss him. Like he's Santa Claus, big white hair. Can't. A thin Santa Claus, I guess.
I guess that's who's gonna love that one, Tony? You got to make sure that makes the final episode.
Hey, if you ever make it out to
you look like Santa Claus, Kenny.
He told me to say it wasn't me.
Yeah,
a really good-looking Santa
Kenny,
Claus.
If you have any, you need his address. No problem.
It's distinguished.
So all these people,
jovial.
All these people kind of got onto the tour in their own way, but you're always gonna have kind of that early memory of like when you get out on the road, like what maybe you envision and what it actually is.
Right.
And I think we heard from some of these people about their early memories.
I remember the first day I get there, I pulled up in my cab to the bus, and there was a bonfire in the parking lot with skateboards and like random stuff, and people were doing ollies over it. And you walked by and just shook your head, and I think you were just too busy to deal with it. But I was like, wow, this is pretty rad. I can get used to this.
Initially for them, it must have seemed very glamorous, but it was a lot of work too.
Yeah, but from Mormon mission to
he must have been on the moon. He's like, this is awesome.
He's finally. But I did ask him if he did pack his still have the underwear back then.
Oh yeah, they did. I'm sure.
That he wore them on tour. Mm-hmm. If they were itchy when it got really hot, or it kind of helped protect certain parts of his body. Danny, I mean, he just is a lot of great memories. So let's hear another one from him. I think it was pretty funny.
I was on the bus with Brian Dell, John Firpo, and Andy Lee, Gary O, and all these dudes that are just beyond me in years of experience of the music industry. Not just that, but I was frightened to death of all these guys, and they would reach their hands in my bunk and mess with me because I was a good little Mormon boy. And I mean, it stiffened me up a little bit. I was happy. They turned me into who I am today. So I'm grateful for Bus 4.
Probably stiffened you up in many ways.
Wrong choice of words right there.
I know. It's not good.
Christ. You went for the cheap one there, Kevin. Good job.
Oh, yeah, get better at those,
Yeah.
So
rapier wit.
It was interesting for me because family got involved in this. Fran was always home, like buttoning it down at home, whatever, taking care of everything. But there was a moment of time when my daughter started to get interested to come on the road.
Oh man!
And we did ask Sierra a question, about her beginning of Warped Tour, which I thought her response was pretty funny.
I haven't seen this one, and I love Sierra. I want to know what her perspective was for the first time.
Was it hard to date on the Warped Tour with your dad around?
I think it was hard dating and also making friends because people were always nervous. Like, was I a narc out there, or was I always being watched? But I think part of that is just you really develop a family out there, and it's not that you're being watched or people are like, oh, what is she doing now? It's more like, oh, they've got your back if you get in trouble or anything like that, or if it's more a family environment.
Were you a narc?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I was on the tournament with her, and I think she was at the last thing as well. But one of the things she said immediately was, well, it was hard to date.
Yeah.
Because everybody knew that she was Kevin's daughter.
And we won't go into her, but the kid that she dated, that we still love, he was a great guy. And she met him on the Warped Tour. And,
right.
And, it didn't work out afterwards because separation and distances and things. But we really love this kid, So Connor, if you're out there, I do have your back still.
She was like, why are you bringing him up? But see, that's the whole thing. Lockdown. You had her on lockdown, and good for you, because I would have done the same.
But it was.
You want to date, kid? You're never dating, ever.
But then, so we're out there on the road, and then, dynamics and everything. But, a lot about this episode will be about the Warped Roadies TV show. But we were doing other things out on the road. And,
Sure.
you know, I don't know, a lot of people may not realize that we did horror movies on the Warped Tour. That,
What?
oh, yeah, we shot a thing. A friend, Doug Sackman was his name, and he worked for a company called Troma Films, which is kind of a, like D or B horror movies, but they had like a cult following.
F or G.
No, you know, but it was, so he came up with an idea that he wanted to shoot a horror movie on Warped Tour called Punk Rock Holocaust. And, you know, as always, I'm like, sure, okay.
Let's do it.
You know, you probably talk to him in like September, October. You know, a lot of times you have these discussions with people, and it'd be like, people would come in and talk about nonprofits. We'd be talking about bands.
Right.
He comes over and wants to do a horror movie.
Let's make a movie.
And I'm
you're
like,
thinking to yourself, we got all these leftover ketchup packets from the tour.
And I'm like, okay, not, you know, so a lot of times these people, you never hear from them again or didn't come together. Well, he started really digging into this. And by March, when we're announcing the tour, he's like, got a bus. He's bringing some actors. He's now got me convinced to feed them all summer. You know, like normally like, I'm now investing in the movie somehow, you know, but no formal deal. He's going to be out on the road. And we shot this movie, and it was being written because you couldn't call a manager and say, hey, we want your band to be in Punk Rock Holocaust, or, hey, we want your music label in Punk Rock Holocaust. So sometimes you just have to do things. So Punk Rock Holocaust was a complete, like, winging it movie, like literally being written as the tours.
I'm sure, seat of your pants. I'm surprised you had any ownership of it left after one band saying, I didn't authorize this.
No, everyone, no, it was like, I need to be in this.
Oh, that's cool.
No, every band started seeing how their band was killed. Like, so every band was
really
being killed
cool.
on Warped Tour. So then it'd be like, Simple Plan going, we need to be killed. Or the Used, we need, wait, no, what? And then eventually it got, as always, back to Pennywise. They weren't on the tour that year, but they heard about it and demanded
that they get killed.
So Doug lives in Philadelphia and had to come kill him at some club show, like the Trocadero or something. Like, had to splice in this random scene of the band getting killed.
Right.
And it was, so you're sitting there and eating, and Sully had some good reflections on that.
My big acting debut, of course. Man, I was smoking like 9 cigars a day that year. They dubbed my voice in such a crazy redneck voice. It's awesome. I love it. I got it here on my wall, actually. I'm going to show you. I hope this doesn't mess up. I don't know if you can see my copy. You see that?
Yeah. Punk Rock Holocaust.
It's a little teaser for that episode, but this crowd surfing dead during Rancid. We sat in a security meeting with medical and said we were going to do this. Myself and Glenn Ray and Joe Perez bring the first 3 dead people, and they're covered in blood, and we put them in a pile at the end of the barricade. Nobody told the medics. They freaked out. It's the funniest. That year was just crazy. Guys running around with swords and stuff. The crowd, I was like, stop them, please.
So yeah, it was like, I would try to explain to the venue, like, we've let all these kids know if they get here early. And it'd be like, while you're trying to set up this big show, I'd be like,
you could be in the movie.
There's going to be like 200 kids here, and we're going to let them in early, and we're going to shoot some crowd scenes before doors. So we're like, you know, we're going hard. And we'd bring them all in, and they would like literally give them like their arm cut off. So when the people are coming over the barricade, and when he says that the medics freaked out, it's like they've lost an arm in the mosh pit. We literally were doing this on the fly, and you'd have a band playing on the stage, and sometimes we needed it while a band was playing. So the band would be playing, and then we'd have like 100 kids like fall on the ground and pretend like they're dead all in the middle of a set.
I'm surprised this didn't take off. Wouldn't it have been great to have like Punk Rock Holocaust 2?
Oh, we did. Oh, yeah.
Did you really?
There is Punk Rock Holocaust 2, and there's actually an online version of Punk Rock Holocaust 3 out there.
Did it make any money at all? Or was it just a big...
Well, as always,
it's fun to make a movie. It's fun.
There it goes about the money again, Tony, because I'm like,
it's always about the money.
Last time I heard, it was dubbed into like 20 languages around the world, something like that. And Doug is it was so fun, and it was just, you know, he'd wear a Vans. He'd come, and he was a Vans killer. So he was promoting Vans, but he was like a masked killer in this thing. And the cover of it has him wearing this Vans shirt with his, you know, get up.
Well, we won't reveal who the killer is because people need to go out and
get Punk Rock Holocaust 4. So
that might be the television show.
Yeah,
The barbecue version.
Punk Rock Holocaust 4, the retirement home version. It's like filmed at the Punk Rock retirement home. But so everyone it's like we're doing movies out there, we're doing this, but
That's cool though.
Terry, of course, he's a little entrepreneur. So Terry came up with something out on the road that we should probably point out.
My Life versus Your Vacation was just like this really fun clothing line that Josh and I had started, and we started it because of Warped Roadies. So I don't know if like a lot of people knew this, but we didn't get paid anything to do Warped Roadies. No. We just we're doing our normal job, and then these cameras were following us around. And so of course we were like, well, how do we capitalize on this, right? So when we had all met at a Coachella one year. Like, me and Danny were friends. That's where I had met Mike Holshoe for the first time. That's where I met Josh for the first time. And we all became really close and wanted to keep in touch with each other on our individual tours and stuff. So we started hashtagging everything MLVYV so that we could find each other and see what each other were doing. And so it started off like that, just as a way to keep in touch. And then, and then when the TV show came around, we were just like, I mean, this is great. Like, let's put this on a shirt. And like, also, like, none of us ever thought we would be able to do this kind of stuff, like we all dreamt about it, but with like dedication and going after it, we accomplished it. And, I mean, it's cliche, but like, if we can do it, so can you. And we wanted to inspire the youth, and especially the youth of Warped Tour, because that's where at least I came out of, so that's what it was all kind of about. And then, I closed the online shop just this last year. I wasn't really good at it online, to tell you the truth. I was really good at it at Warped Tour and like talking to people and being in front of people. And so when Warped Tour died out, MLVYV kind of died out with it, but like, it wasn't a sad thing. Like, we inspired a ton of people, and it was really, really fun. And I'm really glad that I did it.
I could never quite get it. I'd be like, my life versus your vacation. My life. I don't have to, like, every morning I'd walk by and go, my life versus your vacation. And it kind of sunk into my head and stuff. And, Terry was about, like, he's one of those people that he now works on the cruise ships. He's out there working. He's like a host. He
the
does
Rock
all these
Tour
things.
cruise ship.
But he
stuff.
kind of, had this kind of philosophy about, what the whole show was. He got it. And, what he just said, the next thing he just says is kind of sums up like what he was all about. And Terry's that kind of person. He's got that spirit.
One of the most beautiful parts about Warped Tour is like, we all have this job, everybody, the bands, the crew, the production office, everybody, we're here to accomplish one thing. And that's to throw this one day festival where we're just going to show kids the greatest time ever. And I feel like we always accomplish that. And especially when we were shit on and like given like the worst odds, if the worse the odds, the better the show.
And that's kind of was his mentality. I mean, he's a good person, got good heart. And that was really what all the people that we've talked about so far on the show, just have great hearts,
No, it's great. I think it's sad that it took him 5 years to get the gig after volunteering first.
Well, I think he really appreciated it.
That's good.
Sometimes it doesn't come easy. But that line, my life versus your vacation, I could never remember it. I always had to read it, like my life versus your vacation. Actually was relevant at one point.
Again, one really quick story, right? West Palm Beach, the day that Brian Marquis got hit by lightning. That's how that storm, we had an evacuation, huge storm in West Palm. Brian Marquis getting hit by lightning was how that evacuation started, right? And then we had hours of insane shit. And we were clearing out things, and the trash had filled up the where all the water was going, right? And the trash had stopped it, so that's what it made the water raise real hard. And we came out there we figured it out, and we're running out there to do it. And you were already there in like knee-high water, picking shit out of the drain. And you looked up at me and you go, my life versus your fucking vacation, right, Terry?
So I guess you remembered it that time.
I guess I remember it. Finally, I always wondered why I would read it every time. It's stuck in my head. And, I never know when something like that's going to come back. But, I always believed, that every great event or festival, we talk about needing great bands. You need great crew. You need great sponsors. But really, the success of Warped Tour came from great media partners too. You know, everyone would typically say at that point that you wanted Rolling Stone or Spin Magazine. Really couldn't get any recognition in those magazines. They'd run like Summer,
blurb,
a
yeah.
bunch of bands touring on the Warped Tour, not even name the bands. It was like that was the press we got
Right.
from them. And MTV, even though in 1995 they came around with the sports and music show that was going on, and Anna Carolla was out there with us on the road. It was super fun, but they were kind of into other things, you know, at that point. And I try to have, you know, they just really, and I was never someone to force myself. And it kind of goes back to like, so one of the people I went to was AP Magazine, which was based in Cleveland. And Mike Shea and AP, I said, you guys actually write about the bands I work with, and you work in the, let's partner up. So we partnered up with AP Magazine for the duration of the better part of the tour at that point. We were doing programs that we could give the kids. There was a lot of collaborations.
They were doing the program?
Yeah, they were giving the program that we gave away for
that
free.
Was great.
All the things we did with AP were fantastic. But there was a moment in time when there was this upstart kind of television station. And I had heard about it. And what I was hearing was this upstart station, everyone was going there and seeing what they could get out of them and then running over to MTV to see if they could leverage our business. It was leveraging. And I would go to New York every year, and I got tired of going. I got tired of going to MTV and not coming out with any real tangible support because I had these ideas, and this is where this relationship started with Fuse Television. Dave Weir, who was actually kind of in programming and production for Fuse, so I had to organize, and we organized a meeting to meet with them.
Right.
Yeah, I was senior vice president of music programming, but you know, I wore a lot of different hats over the years. I remember taking a meeting with you. I mean, at the time I had just joined Fuse, and my counterpart Janice, she had started Fuse with an angle of kind of an open lane, the open lane being rock, because the competitive services, whether it was MTV or BET, they were playing in pop and hip hop and whatnot, and there was no lane for rock in terms of music television. So I was familiar with the Warped Tour, but I hadn't been on it yet, and I hadn't met you yet. So that was a new relationship for me, which turned out to be a great one in 15 years.
You know, and the coolest thing about Fuse was they were really, you know, MTV was starting to drift into a lot of different type of programming. They were all over, you know, but Fuse was actually playing a lot of this music for the bands.
And what's ironic about that is that Fuse over the years and now has changed dramatically, has turned from that. As you know, in my business, I do a lot of work with Fuse Network, and I've built a lot of their post infrastructure. So they're you know, been in a situation where they've been struggling to make some infrastructure changes and all that. But one of the highlights that they produced, one of the really great shows that they did on their own, because they're outsourcing from a lot of production companies, was your show. Yeah. It still stands up today if you watch it. It's a great show.
It started out, you know, with Dave, and you know, one of the coolest things, they were doing a lot of really cool videos with some of the bands that we worked with.
So what Fuse would do we'd send our crews out, and I would visit with them. We'd set up interviews with the bands. We'd come out to the early stops on the tour. And then we'd create programming fundamentally called Warped Wednesday. And the channel was taken over by Warped Tour every Wednesday during the summer. So probably about 8 to 10 weeks that followed the course of the tour and the time of the tour. And we'd play music videos from the current Warped Tour bands, from the kind of all-star greatest hits of Warped Tour, and then put the interviews and the footage in between the music videos and give our audience an immersion into Warped Tour on Wednesdays so that they could get excited about the tour coming to their town.
And one of the things that, you know, we did very early, now you see it all the time when brands integrate into programming.
Of course.
We were probably some of the first doing that. We got really involved with their sales team. So when we had a sponsorship, we would kind of say, oh, here's our sponsor, or you have a brand that needs some maybe on-site presence. And we would really coordinate And they would come out. And I remember with Kia one time, they came to that first show and shot all kinds of commercials with the Kia backstage and all this kind of programming. And one of the integrated marketing things that really kind of took off, there was a show prior to Warped Roadies. And we talked about this and how we integrated this into one of our sponsors.
You guys introduced us to The Truth, and they became a sponsor of ours, and we collaborated to create this integrated, today it's called branded content, but back then we called it integrated marketing with various bands and with the kids who were on tour on behalf of The Truth. And I remember them doing like various kinds of games and dance contests and trivia and whatnot. So we followed both them and a selection of crew members and artists around Warped Tour for 6 episodes worth of programming, which I think we probably shot in a week's worth of shows, to be honest. It was almost like we casted them. They were great. I think, the funny thing is my one memory about them is that they were harder to schedule than the actual bands were because they were busy doing their jobs and they were good at doing their jobs, spreading the word about not smoking. And I remember it being a funny concept to me that the funding was actually coming from Big Tobacco, but their jobs were to tell people not to smoke. So it was a very interesting story and group of characters who we got to work with.
Now the show, and this is where I got to kind of tell you, it's kind of a funny thing that's what happened during the show, was these kids worked so hard. Talk about a tight-knit group. To work for The Truth, they did a nationwide search. Like you applied from around the world, like we did for certain things, but they actually, you applied for this position, did videos, did auditions, then you got brought to Washington, D.C.
Can you explain what working for The Truth means? What is The Truth?
The Truth traveled with this orange truck, okay? And they had to have a DJ in the truck.
Okay.
And then they would do games all day long. They do weird games. You're at a punk rock show.
Right.
And they would do like Duck, Duck, Goose or Red Rover, okay. Or like, what's it when you freeze? Like freeze tag.
Yeah.
So all these kind of things. And you'd be like, it was kind of ironic because like when we're trying to blend this all together at the beginning, you've got mohawks, you've got tat, it changed over time, but it was like, oh, this is not going to work. Totally fucking worked. Like,
oh, it did.
It was awesome. You'd go by and kids just genuinely, and that's where you realize people genuinely really wanted to have fun. And their premise was same thing as mine.
Red Rover, send the guy with the green mohawk on over.
Totally.
And it worked. It was fun.
And they would give away great private merch and all this stuff. And I literally, like, I would walk by and there'd be like, it might be like they'd be like 3 tatted dudes doing like, breakdancing or something like that. And
Twister, maybe.
And it was real. And it was like these kids worked really hard and they auditioned and they had care and they would go all day long.
Sure.
They did not stop, like go all day long.
Youth.
So, but I think what happened was the video, like they knew they could get X amount of content, but then the production crew that was out shooting for them started to see some of the other things going on Warped Tour. And then that kind of spun into this concept, and Dave will bring us up to speed on where that went.
What became Warped Roadies started at a time when Fuse was branching out. We had gotten some more budgets, some larger budgets, and we were able to call upon production companies, and we were kind of kicking around the idea of a reality show, but we didn't want the salacious reality show that MTV had. We actually wanted a real show with real people and kind of profiling what they did in the music business. The president at the time said, we should do a show about roadies. And that was coming from his experience as part of our parent company, which was Madison Square Garden. And in his mind, it was, go backstage at the Garden and, have Paul Simon or Guns N' Roses coming through and what their roadie life is as they come through the Garden. So that conversation evolved because I said, there's a couple of challenges with that. Axl Rose isn't going to be on a reality show.
Right.
And if he did, it was going to be censored and he wasn't, he was going to have full approval and it just wasn't going to develop the way that the executives thought it might. And I said, listen, we've got this relationship with the Warped Tour and not only do they have roadies, they've got 100 people working on 10, 15 different stages, and they put up this city over, overnight, every night over the course of the entire summer. And not only is it rich with personality, but the circumstances of putting up a festival every other day during the summer lead itself to a lot of variables that would be really interesting to watch. And
drama is what he's saying.
Having
Drama.
been a part of Warped Tour at that point for probably about 10 years, I was always amazed by it. I'd get off the bus, off of Kevin's bus in the morning, and see this, this show being built. And it was always so impressive how quickly it turned around, and hundreds of kids at 11 a.m. lining up around the venue, waiting to get in to see their favorite bands. And then those kids running from stage to stage to catch whoever they were trying to catch as all the stages fired off. I could see that in my mind, but this was a very new concept to executives from Madison Square Garden who were used to working in the Beacon Theater or Madison Square Garden itself. It was a very different kind of idea. Yeah. I left that meeting and went back to, doing my work, and for a few weeks didn't hear anything of it until, Kevin, you called me and said, Dave, what's going on? What's this show that you're pitching? And why haven't we discussed it yet? Which surprised me because, I hadn't heard anything back since that meeting. Turns out that the company who was pitching the idea in the first place, McGilla, they went to CAA and pitched the idea. And originally they had gone backstage to a Guns N' Roses show. I think that was before Duff and Slash were back reunited with Axl. And we saw the footage, I recall, and the footage was like, middle-aged guys who were humping road cases backstage at, a random arena in Tampa or in Atlanta, and there just wasn't much to see. It wasn't very interesting, and of course, Axl wasn't a part of it. So they, re-geared and went back to CAA and asked them if they could get involved with Warped Tour. So that's when I got the call from you saying, like, what's going on here, and let's talk this through.
So basically what he's saying is there are beautiful young people on the Warped Tour and much more interesting to watch.
I don't know about,
Come on, let's face it, it's true.
It was interesting, and and then it's like, so sometimes it's funny because it gets no one, CA McGill, you got to go to the agents to dig it out,
right.
Not knowing that Dave knows that if it was going to work, it was going to be with me figuring it out, and Daryl's fantastic, but Daryl's like, dude, what are you doing? Some TV show or something? Like, I don't, that's how he was always, he was busy, man. He was a super agent,
right?
And so we start getting into the movie pretty quick, kind of going close to the tour. So not only are you putting a tour together, but once again, it's like punk rock holocaust. Let's just figure this out,
right?
And then you had to kind of figure out characters to be in this. So it was interesting because McGill, I just gave him a list of people that they may want to talk to. But by the time they got out there, they had a pretty good idea who they were going to cover. But I had no idea how that went about. So let's see, how these guys got on the show.
They were selected, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember getting a call from McGilla Productions, who was, shooting it for Fuse. And they said, they called me and they said, hey, do you want to, they interviewed me first on the phone. And then they said, hey, so you made it to the second cuts. How about you and your crew come out to LA and we can do a little in-room audition with you guys? And I said, question, why did you guys choose me? And why did you even call me of all the people in the tour? And they said, well, we called Kevin Lyman. And he said, if you want to shoot a TV show, you should film the setup crew called Danny Bateman. And at that time I was 25, 26, maybe. About as wild as I ever have been. But yeah. It was great. We killed it.
They unhooked the underwear and you got going.
Absolutely.
When you lost them more, Xavier's like, what?
Yeah.
The special underwear the Mormons live. They wear special underwear.
Yeah, it's called garments, and it's Xavier. If you want to know, I can bring you to church and I can show you what it's like, and I'll bring you to God. Don't worry.
They'll lock you down.
It's funny. I actually wore my garments up until the week I was packed. It's funny. I forgot about this, but now that you mentioned that, when I was packing for my first Warped Tour, I contemplated bringing them, and I'm like, you're gonna get debauchery, you're gonna get destroyed if you bring these. So I left them, and that was the last time I wore those things.
You probably would have been left outside the bus in some public place.
Or they all would have worn them one day when I wasn't watching and pranced around the bus, and I'm like, that's an instant ticket to hell.
That's interesting with the dynamics it must have made amongst all the roadies. They all knew that the show was asking who would be on it, who would be prominent. Did that change anything between the roadies?
Well, I
and
mean,
what you
it
remember?
was interesting. Once they started hearing about this, it's like there's people who felt I think they had to be, and I think Terry was one of those people who, he was ready for this moment.
So I did Warped Tour I did 10 years total, and I feel like it was just about halfway. It was about our 4th or 5th year. We had heard, how did I hear this? We had heard that they were going to do a TV show about Warped Tour, that they didn't know who was going to be on it or anything, that they wanted to just start interviewing people from the Warped Tour to see like who they could use as this cast of characters. And we were like prime time setup crew by then, right? Like this was like our group of best friends, like me, Danny Bateman, Mike Holshoe, Josh Candy, David Knapp, like the whole crew. Baby Justin was on there. He was like 18 years old then, I think. And we just knew it. Like we knew it. Like it's gonna be us. Like it has to be us, Like we can carry this show. And everybody had came to LA. I was living in LA at the time, and everybody came and stayed with me at my apartment. And they had like rented out a suite at some swanky hotel in West Hollywood. And like we came and they did like one-on-one interviews with us. But they let us all stay in the room, and we were just reckless, like we were just all making fun of each other and just like throwing jabs at each other the whole time. Like even when we were doing these interviews, just being entertaining as hell, but like just being us, like we were all best friends. So we had it. And then, yeah, I mean, I guess like right before tour started, they told us that like, yeah, we were going to be mic'd up and we were going to be on this Warped Roadies show.
Supposed to be like an ensemble cast, just a bunch of people.
They were chasing MTV's Real World. Let's be honest. They wanted something similar to that, but what they got was something totally different and good.
Yeah, God, Real World, that just kind of sparks. I knew one of the first people on Real World that almost destroyed their life. But, that show. But, Dave had a view that, how this started to take shape, that, he had a little perspective on this.
Danny was great. I mean, he was a star, and I think he's more interested in being a star on some days than he was doing his job, and that was part of his character. I remember he wanted to sell some T-shirts or something at some point, and there were a lot of side stories with Danny, but he was definitely one of the ones we focused on.
Terry Myers.
Terry was his sidekick, wasn't he?
Yeah.
They were kind of the collaborators that saw television as a real opportunity for them, and they wanted to, take advantage of it as much as possible.
This is kind of an interesting story. There was a band called First to Last. Mm-hmm. It was a kind of a emo, screamo kind of band, that sort of thing. Big band, popular.
Yeah.
Starting to grow very quickly. Epitaph Records had signed them. They were one of the only bands that ever showed up with 2 buses, which I couldn't understand. Right. Now, the lead singer of that band, I knew him as Sonny. And Sonny was a great singer, a nice kid who actually went to school up here in La Cañada, right near where my daughters went to school and everything. And just a nice person. But there was this moment in time where it was like he was having vocal problems. And I couldn't understand why they were out with 2 buses and who was giving him that kind of advice.
Right.
Like, you don't need 2 buses on Warped Tour. Save your money.
Right.
And I actually made a quote to him, and I said, hey, man, I hope you figure this out because I don't want you to be changing oil at Jiffy Lube, which is a fine job, but he was too talented. I thought maybe if he blew all the money, they'd be changing oil one day at Jiffy Lube. Well, a year later, I get a call, not even a year later, his voice he was having struggles, so he decided to develop this new sound, and he was drifting into the sounds of EDM. Okay. So he invited me down to Koreatown, down to a loft, and he says, well, Kevin, I'm going to be a DJ. And I said, oh, okay, let me listen to what you're doing. We're listening. And, I've never, EDM. I'm like, and he goes, yeah, my new name's going to be Skrillex.
Oh, shit.
So
Get out of here.
So I'm like, I really, and to this day, I love Sonny. Like when I see him out at an event, he is a true gentleman. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's a sweetheart.
But I go, Sonny, you can come out on Warped Tour to break this summer. So I went home and sent them an offer for $1,250 to come on the show. The agent calls me and goes, Kevin, we got to get $1,500 or we can't do this. I'm like, Sonny's like $1,250. So he did one Warped show because that was his thing.
Right.
But by that summer, he was making $100,000 a show as Skrillex. So,
That's
some people
crazy.
always talk about me maybe having good taste in bands and booking. That was one that was kind of blown.
Right.
And somewhere that's on tape where I told him that you might be changing oil one day down at the street. So, but it's just a funny thing that sparked from that discussion with Dave.
It's really cool to see all these people, and I know that the next episode we're going to talk about them again, where they are now today and how it's completely changed their lives.
I'm looking forward to seeing you next week at the golf tournament.
Yes, the golf tournament's going to be amazing. We're going to have some good friends out there. It's the best tournament.
Yeah, Duffing for Dollars. We'll be raising money for Music Cares.
Music Cares.
And look forward to seeing you. And thanks for the golf balls, my Warped Life.
Check out the golf balls.
It's always great when people step up for their communities, and one of those people is Chris Bullard. I've had the pleasure to meet him, and I want to tell you about one of his upcoming events. 2021 Sound Mind Mental Health Music Festival, bringing together musicians, music lovers, and a coalition of mental health organizations to build a supportive community around mental health. Featuring All Time Low, Fits in the Tantrums, Lovely the Band, and plus many more, celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month with a live drive-in outdoor music festival to foster empathy and increased awareness around mental health. The live drive-in event is being held at the Ventura County Fairgrounds on May 20th at 6 Pacific Time. Get tickets now at soundmindlives.org. For those outside of Southern California, you can tune in from home via Consequence of Sound at facebook.com/consequence. All event proceeds support the National Alliance on Mental Illness, the nation's largest grassroots organization for mental health, providing mental health programs free of charge to anyone who needs them. I just want to thank some of the recent people who have subscribed to our Patreon. Thank you, Jeremy Leary, Dan Doty, Holiday Nagel, Anthony Sattler, Dennis Levine, Kate Truscott, and Fran Lyman. Thank you so much for supporting us, and hope you enjoy the exclusive content.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and please review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. Also, you can hear the uncut versions of these interviews on our Patreon for $5.
Next week, we will continue with the Roadies and hear how the fame got to their heads and how their lives changed after the show. Thank you, Tony Aradia. You enjoy your week.
Looking forward to the golf tournament, Kevin.
Thank you, Xavier. Take two. Bradley.
We have another producer, Vivian.
That's right. Almost forgot
Wonderful.
Vivian. I was thinking about Vivian's wedding. I just got flashed. She's getting married soon. And while we're at it, let's thank Beata Shemtov for all her work on our social media. And then we've got, of course, the most important person of the show.
On the planet.
Diego Ratia. Take us away, Diego.